You probably watched a movie before and thought about that situation happening to you. You probably have gotten frustrated with the decisions made by some people in movies, especially the scary ones. Although we know that it is very unlikely to have a man in a mask chasing us every Halloween, other movies make us think that it would be terrifying to be in their position because it looks like something that can actually happen in real life. Those are the movies that make us turn all the lights on inside our house, but imagine stumbling across a story that would make you feel like you are watching the latest Hollywood horror movie just to find out that it is all real. And just like in some movies, a terrible decision led to nightmare that 30 years later had a man pleading on his deathbed. Townsend, Massachusetts was a quiet place, and like most places with no crime, it was considered safe to live and be around. It was one of those places where neighbors don't even worry about locking the doors at night. This was until November 1987, when someone broke into a house and stole 2 handguns. Although this was bad, nobody could have guessed that the worst was about to come. On December 1st, 1987, Andrew Gustafson called home, trying to contact his 33-year-old wife Priscilla, who was 7 months pregnant, his 7-year-old daughter Abigail, and 5-year-old son William. He got worried after he called a few times and nobody answered. It was a little late, and this meant that they were at home. Andrew was away for work reasons, but after not hearing from his family, he decided to go back home. When he arrived home, he noticed that Priscilla's car was in the driveway, which meant that she was home, but upon entering the house, there was no sound. He called them a couple of times while walking to the house, and it was not until he entered their room that he realized why no one was answering. His wife Priscilla was in bed with pillows covering her face. The pillows had blood on them and bullet holes. Abigail and William were found. They were drowned in 2 different bathtubs in the house. After finding this scene, Andrew called the police immediately. The police described this as one of the most disturbing scenes, even saying that decades later the image of the bodies is still fresh in their minds. A man just lost his entire family, and in most cases, police turned to the closest person, the husband and father, Andrew. But he had a pretty solid alibi. There was no way for him to be in there during the last moments of his family. Also, he pointed out something that happened days prior and seemed to be minor, but now became important. Andrew mentioned a breakout in his home, some TV remote was stolen upon another minor item, and a beer that was half full. When detectives heard this, the idea that Andrew was involved vanished a little because next to Priscilla's body, on the nightstand, they found a beer bottle and a condom wrapper. Based on this evidence, they had the feeling that someone else was behind this. Detectives had one person in mind. Even saying this is something only Daniel LaPlante would do. Daniel LaPlante was born on May 15, 1970, and lived in Townsend, Massachusetts with his mom and stepfather. His childhood was far from good. He was abused in every way, neglected, and when he tried to reach out for help, his counselor abused him too. It was not hard to understand why Daniel was not doing well in school and had no friends. He was the creepy guy that everyone bullied and nobody wanted to be around. He spent most of his school years getting into trouble for behaving inappropriately in class, and one of the main things why he got in trouble was due to his poor hygiene. Daniel had terrible hygiene, often wearing dirty and smelly clothes, not bathing, not wearing deodorant, and not brushing his teeth regularly. He was abused and neglected, so calling his mom did not change anything. Although there are no specific details on his relationship with his mom, you can see that she was not paying attention to him. So it is not a surprise when you learn that at the age of 15, Daniel's inappropriate behavior turned into criminal behavior. At first, he spent most of his time breaking and entering strangers' homes. He had no harmful intentions. He was just a teenager having fun in the worst way possible. He wanted to control something and mess with people, so he would enter people's homes and rearrange their things, move them just to probably make them think that they were losing their minds or give them a good scare. During this time, Daniel managed to find a phone number from a girl that he liked. He knew her from school and had a crush on her. In 1986, Daniel managed to call the home of 14-year-old Tina Bowen, and while talking a little bit, Daniel described himself as a tall, athletic, and blonde-haired guy. Tina and Daniel would talk on the phone, and it is unclear for how long Tina said no to going on a date with him, but eventually he managed to convince her. So they set the time to go on a date and get ice cream. As you can imagine, when Tina met Daniel, she was disappointed and upset. Instead of a tall, athletic, and blonde-haired guy, found a short, dark-haired guy with terrible hygiene and probably not nice teeth. Despite this, she decided to give him a chance and went on a date, but it went bad. Tina was so disturbed by Daniel that she decided to cut the date after an hour and rejected a second date. It appears that Daniel was making some awful comments and was morbidly curious about Tina's mom, who had passed recently from cancer. Tina was not happy with this and went back home. After this, she never heard from him again and nothing came out of it, or at least that's what she thought. Tina lived with her dad, Frank Bowen, a school bus driver who worked long hours to support his family while they all dealt with the mom's recent passing. She also had a younger sister, Karen, who became her main support since they spent a lot of time alone at home. The two girls were dealing with the loss of their mom, and her only parent was away most of the time. It was hard for them to deal with this, and like many kids, they didn't understand why their father was away most of the time. Despite this, the relationship was not terrible, but this was starting to change. The girls played with an Ouija board, trying to get in contact with their mother, and started to hear sounds. Believing that this was the ghost of their mom, the girls told their dad and he brushed it off, thinking that this was a way for them to grieve and deal with the sad reality. But this was not what he thought, and things quickly became more upsetting for him because now the girls were constantly saying that they were hearing strange sounds around the house. They would hear knocks, thuds, and things moving, and it went from listening things to seeing them. The girls would say that things were being moved from one place to another, quickly turning against each other and accusing each other of moving their belongings. Frank thought that it was an innocent thing that happened during grief, quickly turned into a problem because the girls were constantly fighting and telling him about the noises inside the house, probably still thinking that it was their mom. But Frank would have never imagined what happened on December 8th, 1986. On that day, Frank, Tina, Karen, and a friend walked into the house only to find that nothing was in place. This time, things were not just moved out of place, but lights were on, all the TVs in the house were on, and the volume was all the way up. The family freaked out, and Frank decided to search the house. When he got to the basement, he found another surprise in the unflushed toilet. Confirming that someone indeed was there, his biggest surprise was when he opened a closet and locked eyes with an unknown stranger. A man that he couldn't recognize was wearing a furry coat. His face was painted and his hair was spiked. The man had a hatchet and a steel wrench, and despite a small struggle, the man ended up demanding Frank to get into the bedroom with the girls. The family was walking towards the room, the girls first, Frank in the middle, and the intruder last upon entering the room. Frank slammed the door, leaving the man out. In the rush of trying to calm the girls and figure a plan, Tina got upset and decided to escape by jumping out of the bedroom window. She ran to the neighbors and the police were called. Police quickly arrived and searched the area, but nothing and no one was found. There were no signs, and for some odd reason, police did not believe the story because it sounded too bizarre, especially the part when a man with a painted face was inside their house and there was no sign that someone broke into their house. Now, the stories of the girls were making a little bit more sense to Frank. The noises and strange things being out of place were clear to him. Someone was inside the house. Police couldn't find anything, so they left. The family was spooked, so they decided that they couldn't sleep in the house and left for a hotel. 2 days later, Frank returned to the home alone, and while approaching the house, he was met with one of the most terrifying things of his life. The man was waving at him from inside the house. Frank quickly turned around, left, and called the police. Upon arriving, the police officer recalls looking at Frank, and his face had the expression of a man who was spooked and shocked, repeating, "I just saw him again." Police got into the house with the thought that whoever was there was gone, but when he entered, he saw something that made him believe everything. Hanging on the wall, there was a picture of the family with a knife stuck into it, and it said, "I'm still here, come find me." The officer said that at that moment he knew that someone was in there and that he was going to find it, but his mind changed when he looked down the hallway and there was another photo with a knife and said, "I'm going to kill you all." That's when the officer decided that it was better to leave and request backup. The officers then went back into the house and recalled searching every room, every corner, and even inside the mattresses, but nothing was found. While in the basement, frustration was starting to rise when one of them looked into a corner and noticed some pipes. The pipes were from the bathroom. They had a wall built to avoid being looked at, but there was space enough for someone to fit in. And police, following their instincts, got in there, and it was there, in between the walls of the house, that a pile of clothes was found. But this was like a 4-foot pile of clothes. And upon moving some pieces, hair stuck up, and this is when they found the stranger. The stranger who held the family hostage and taunted Frank from inside his own house was found. This stranger was none other than Daniel LaPlante. The guy who lied to Tina got rejected and became so obsessed with her that decided to break into her house and live there for 6 months. Daniel was inside and out of the house for 6 months without anyone noticing. Daniel was the one making sounds, moving things, making the girls believe that the house was haunted. Daniel would remove the electrical outlets to spy on the family. He knew every movement, and he would come in and out of the house like it was his own. After Daniel was caught by police, he was arrested, and some officers said that it was disturbing to be around him and that they knew that he was not a good person. Daniel went into juvenile detention in 1986, so you can see why in 1987 detectives thought of Daniel when they found tragedy inside the Gustafson residence. But they had one problem: Daniel was in juvie. Or at least that's what they thought, because to everyone's surprise, when Daniel turned 17, the judge decided that he should be tried as an adult, and when he was charged as an adult, he was able to get out on bail. His mom bailed him out for $10,000 after she managed to put a mortgage on the house. The problem is that no one knew about this, and the judge made a terrible mistake by letting him out without any police input. Upon finding this, police went on the lookout for Daniel, and they found him at a library. When Daniel was interrogated, he said that he had an alibi, that he was at a birthday party, but the police didn't believe him much because while they were talking to him, he was a little jumpy. Back at the crime scene, outside the house, the search for evidence was on, and with the help on K9, they were able to locate a wet flannel shirt and some gloves. This was near the house in a wooded area. The K9 picked a scent from those items and followed it. The trail ended in Daniel's house. Police got a search warrant for Daniel's house. They found a wet sock in his room that had blonde hair. They found some bullets that matched the ones that were used to take Priscilla's life. Police had enough to arrest him, but the only problem that was Daniel was not in the house at that moment, and it was even reported that he fled after his first interview with police. Now there was a manhunt, neighbors were notified, and everyone was alarmed, and on the look for Daniel. His picture was everywhere. Police went to the biggest wooded area, a place where they knew Daniel was familiar with, and 2 days later, he was found. He was discovered hiding inside a dumpster. He was surrounded and eventually came out. During the manhunt, he even broke into 2 residences one time to steal weapons, trying to arm himself and the other just to hide, apparently even trying to kidnap a woman. But after he was found in the dumpster, Daniel was arrested. It was confirmed that the hair found on the sock was from little Abigail. The gun that was stolen in November 1987 was the same one that was used for the crimes in the Gustafsons' home. During the trial, it was revealed that the weapon was found inside a car located in Daniel's home. They also found TV remotes and other items that were reported stolen from the property, proving once again that Daniel was inside the house days prior. There was no motive for Daniel other than he wanted to do it. The evidence was there. It was him. He intimately assaulted a pregnant woman, took hers and her unborn child's life, and took the life of his 2 children for no reason other than being an evil person. In court, he expressed no remorse, but he said that he was mad at the prison system for violating his religious rights, saying that he was a Satanist and they didn't offer the right things to carry out rituals, so he tried to sue. Of course, nothing came out of this because it was bizarre. Daniel received 3 life sentences. Now in 2017, he tried to get his sentence reduced, and during this, he actually expressed remorse and regret for his actions. In 2017, his sentence was reduced to 45 years after life sentences for juvenile offenders were outlawed. Daniel will be eligible for release in 2033 and he will be 62 years old. Sadly, Andrew Gustafson passed away in 2014, and on his deathbed, he pleaded for Daniel to never be released, saying that he should rot in prison.